This is a recording from a Sunday meeting of the BC Humanist Association in Vancouver. Humanism is a progressive worldview that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead meaningful, ethical lives capable of adding to the greater good of humanity. To learn more about humanism and to support our work, visit bchumanist.ca and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to the BC Humanist podcast. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of our staff or board of directors.
So I was going to start with a question. How many of you, just raise your hand because since I don't have a microphone to go around, how many of you have heard of Freemasonry? So almost everybody. And I'm sure that there are probably many opinions, different opinions, as there are people here on what Freemason is about. So as I mentioned, I'll give a little bit of background. I descend from a family of Freemasons, and that's how I first heard about it. My grandmother talking about my grandfather, which I never knew. He died before I was born. He was a Freemason, and that's on my father's side. And then doing genealogy, I found out that from my mother's side, I also descended from Freemasons. On my father's generation, only one of his brothers was a Freemason, but he lived in another state, and when I ever asked him about it, he, as an adolescent, he kind of didn't want to give me any answers, and then I found a little book, and the book was in ciphers, so I couldn't read the book, which had the rituals of Freemasonry. And then, so piqued my curiosity. And doing my genealogy, I also found out that my great-great-grandfather founded a lodge in Brazil. Actually, last year I went there. It's another state, and I've never been to this state, but I went to see the lodge. I went to be at the lodge where my great-great-grandfather founded. And this is the building. This building is from 1912. So it was not the building in which he founded the lodge, because he founded it in 1872. But and here's a book about the organization, the lodge, in this state of Vitória, in the state of Espírito Santo in Brazil, and that's the front of the lodge. And I can pass it around, but I want it back. Oh. Okay, so. When you think about Freemasonry, you think about symbols. And there are several symbols. One that's the most prominent used in Freemasonry that you see in the buildings. You can see them outside buildings, which hold lodges throughout the world. So when people say Freemasonry is a secret organization, well, if it's a secret organization, why do they show symbols like this outside their lodges? People in North America, not in other countries, but in North America, people put decals on their cars with the symbols. One of those, the most prominent symbol, the square and compasses. Of course, in this particular symbol, you also see the letter G and other rays and other symbols. That shows that Freemasonry is not secret. Otherwise, you wouldn't find that behind in front of buildings. Also, there are many symbols that you find if you read any books on Freemasonry. Columns. Now you see candles, and you see an altar. Well, it's called an altar. So. Now, we'll talk more about it later. You also see these boards with different symbols. For instance, in which you see columns again, pavement that has black and white. You see the the sun and the moon, etc., etc. That's also part of Freemasonry, and we will find you realize why there's so many symbols as I proceed. So, also, a lot of people think of Freemasonry as being a giant organization because it is. It's universal. It's in almost every country in the world, and they think that's a massive organization with the people who like to think of these theories about governing the world, talk about the Freemasonic group that directs the world and so forth and so on, as if there was a hierarchy that covers the whole world. No, their hierarchy doesn't cover the world. It's usually not even by country, sometimes by country, but other times by regions in the country, sometimes by each state in a country. So it's not a massive organization with a hierarchy from the top that decides everything that's going to be done all over the world. And also, there's more than one Freemasonry, if you can talk about it. There are different groups. I'll go through them. First is what is called the regular Freemasonry. In Canada, or let me be more precise, in BC, that's all you're going to find. The regular Freemasons, so-called regular Freemasons. In other countries, no, you have more than the regular Freemasons. And I'll explain what they're about. There is the regular, the so-called irregular, and then there are the spurious Freemasons, and then there's what's called co-masonry, and what's called just women masonries, Freemasonry, just for women. Examples of architecture and places of different types of Freemasonry. First, let's look at regular Freemasonry. This is an example, and I took that picture is a door. It may be not too clear. It's a door, and it's all wooden door, and it's carved. It's beautiful, and it's huge. It's a gigantic door, and stands in the United Grand Lodge of England's building, which can go on Queen Street, and anybody can visit as they give tours. So if you go to London, you can go there. And actually, films have been filmed there, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And so you see, I don't know if you can see that clear, but the depiction here is a priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant in one of the sections of this door. And then on the top, you see a delta with rays coming out of it. So that's from a regular Freemasonry, because United Grand Lodge of England is a regular Freemasonry. And they claim to be the mother lodge of regular Freemasonry. It's downtown. It's not. It's very. The question was, what part of London is the Grand Lodge of England, United Grand Lodge of England? It's on Queen Street. It's very central. It's a huge building on a corner, and if you go to a website, you'll find out. Yeah. Then next, this is also from there, and that's if you go look at the ceiling. So it's very ornate. It's very beautiful. They're high ceilings. It's marvelous piece of architecture inside. Now, I'm going to show you, but of course this is United Grand Lodge of England. They are the top, right? They govern the lodges, the local lodges all over England, and even they have branches all over the world. So now I'm going to show you the inside of a regular lodge in Brazil. So it's a little bit less ostentatious, but still, you see the symbols, tons of symbols. And this is one lodge. They are very similar, most lodges. That's a regular lodge. Now, I'm going to show you an irregular lodge to see if you see any differences. That's an irregular lodge. There are also Delta, and there's a beautiful there are columns, and there's a statue. I think because this is from France, it's from the Grand Orient of France, which is considered irregular. That statue, I think, is probably the Republic. So that's an irregular lodge. And then I didn't have a picture of inside of a lodge, but you can talk about a spurious lodge. What are spurious lodge? They're also called clandestine lodges. And I don't know if you remember in the 90s, a long time ago, there was a big, it was in the news, about a lodge that was clandestine in Italy called P2, Propaganda 2. And Licio Gelli was the Grand Master. And that ended up on one a Mason, or a spurious, a clandestine Mason, being found dead by hanging under the bridge in Italy, in Rome. So there was a great consternation, and unfortunately a lot of people, because it mentioned, there was this P2 lodge, a Masonic lodge, thought that, Masons are terrible, they're killing the other Masons because that's what they do if they review secrets or if they do something or another. Of course, this is a clandestine lodge. It was not accepted by any other lodges or any other group. It was not part of the Grand Orient of Italy at the time either. And they had been told their chart had been taken out away from them, but they were doing machinations on politics and money. And so, unfortunately, there are some groups that call themselves Masons, and the paraphernalia and maybe even the rituals are the same, but they're used for other nefarious means. And that was one lodge, a spurious lodge, an example. And then co-masonry. What's co-masonry? Co-masonry is a group of Freemasons who are not only men, because in regular Freemasonry, it's only a group for men, not for women. In irregular Freemasonry, the lodges may accept intervisitation, but most are men, and they may accept as part of the organization, like within the Grand Orient France, to have lodges that are co-Masonic, or even just for women, but nobody's forced. And lodges can decide to be just for one sex or both. So lodges can decide to be just for females or just for males, or both. But co-masonry was created it was very popular. This picture is from the beginning of the century, as you can see by the clothing, because one of the groups who really support co-masonry was the Theosophical Society. If you have heard of the Theosophical Society, a group started by H.P. Blavatsky. And, of course, in that group, there's a lot of supernatural events that are occurred, so they say, and that were recognized as being supernatural, about ascended masters and Kutumi and other masters from India, etc. And for some reason, I'm not an expert in theosophy, they decided to support co-masonry, and they have many theosophical members of the Theosophical Society became members of Masonic Lodges, co-masons, where men and women have their meetings together. And then we have women Freemasonry. Now, the reason not all women Freemasonry are older ladies, because the picture is showing older ladies, but from their aprons, from the way they are dressed, I can tell that they are high officers in the organization. So that must have been a meeting where grandmasters or past grandmasters or high officers of the organization attended. So there they are, the women Freemasonry. In this, men cannot go. Just like in the men's lodge, women cannot go, men cannot go. There was a big, sometimes, in the past, there have been concerns, is this against human rights because only for men? They usually do that only for the men's lodge, but they're also only women's lodge. very few in Canada, not that many in the United States. It's more, in Europe, there are more co-masonry and women Freemasonry lodges. Now, what is Freemasonry? So, let's read this together. Because, because I will give you some definition of Freemasonry from different levels. First level, this is from my own lodge. I belong to a lodge. And from the website of my lodge in Vancouver, in North Vancouver, it says, Freemasonry aims to promote friendship, morality, and brotherly love among its members. It is by definition a fraternity, comprised of men from every race, religion, opinion, and background, who are brought together as brothers to develop and strengthen the bonds of friendship. With more than 3 million members, well, the numbers change, 6 million, 5 million, 3 million. They here on the lower side, I think it's more like 5 million in the world. Freemasons belong to the largest and oldest fraternal organization in the world. Freemasonry proposes to make good men better by teaching with metaphors from geometry and architecture about building values based on great universal truths. So, from a humanistic point of view, I don't have any qualms with that. It's very humanistic in a sense, right? Freemasonry promotes humanistic values then, while also urging us to explore our inner self. But this inner self can be called many things. So for Freemasons, it's God, divine, it could be conscious, and could be the higher self, etc. And it talks about morality. Now you have to define what that is, because in this sense, when it's mentioned morality, not in the usual sense, you're doing something immoral, like sinful, etc., etc. It means the doctrine, the morality is meant as being the doctrine of the right and wrong in human conduct. So, what's the best to do in human conduct? If it's a positive thing that you're doing in human conduct, that's morality. That's the one definition. Another definition. Now, I like that one very much. It's from the Grand Orient of Brazil. And by the way, in Canada, in BC, in British Columbia, I am what's called a Grand Representative. It's like an ambassador, so to speak. I am the Grand Representative of the Grand Orient of Brazil here in relation to the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon. So I like this definition. I translated it, so it's in Portuguese. Freemasonry is essentially an initiatory, philosophical, philanthropic, progressive, and evolutionary institution whose ultimate ends are liberty, equality, and fraternity. It advocates the moral, intellectual, and social improvement of humanity through the uncompromised fulfillment of duty by the disinterested practice of beneficence and the constant search for truth. It defends the full freedom of expression of thought as a fundamental human right, including all the responsibility it entails. It fights tyranny and extols the value showing in the provision of service to the order, to the country, and to humanity. Also, it could be a humanistic definition of a humanistic institution, right? I don't see anything wrong with that either. Next. Now, the Grand Orient of France, which is, and of course, when I talk about my lodge and the previous slide, which showed the definition of the Grand Orient of Brazil, these are regular institutions. They are recognized as regular. Now, this is from an irregular Grand Orient of France. But in their website, it says that the Grand Orient of France is a humanistic, initiatory, and fraternal, and has a fraternal commitment. And the magazine, the institution, the Grand Orient of France, publishes a magazine, And the magazine, do you know what the name of the magazine is? Humanism. Humanism. That's the name of the magazine. Now, that's the Grand Orient of France. What happens is, in 1877, the Grand Orient of France became irregular because they decided that the lodges didn't have to require the belief in a supreme being from its members. They could if they wanted, but that was not required. And that's the only reason that it became so-called irregular. Now, yes, the regular. Yes, the question was, did the British require that? And in BC, does it require a belief in a supreme being? Yes, they do. And in BC, the only question that you ask from a candidate is, do you believe in a supreme being? And the candidate says yes or no. They don't demand, what do you mean by that? Pardon me? Well, somebody joked, said that could that be the wife? Well, they don't demand, but it's true. Yeah, that's right. That's why it's called regular. Now, there's another one. There's a lot of writing here, but maybe you won't read all this. This is from the Grand Orient of France, and it says that they are the heirs of men and women, because they accept women, so who in their own way have worked to improve humanity, and then mention some of the famous French Freemasons and others, Voltaire, Lafayette, Garibaldi, etc., and is a vigilant defender of the principles contained in its motto, which is also that of the Republic: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. So it says that the Grand Orient of France is attached to the absolute freedom of conscience, which is guaranteed by the secularity, laïcité, the secularity of institutions. This is why the Grand Orient of France strongly opposes racism and the enemies of democracy. Obviously, in the regular Freemasonry, it's with a magazine called Humanism. It is a humanistic, in my view, a humanistic institution. Now, what does the ritual, Freemasons have rituals. What does it say about Freemasonry? It says, and I can quote, that's not a secret, Freemasonry is a beautiful system of morality, and remember what I said about morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. That's why there's so many symbols. And the source of this is quoted in the first degree ritual of the order. Another thing, Freemasonry has, not in North America, but in other countries, Brazil, some of Europe, they have also different rituals beside the initiation rituals. There are rituals that are open to the public in the sense that in Brazil, for instance, they perform, and that's Ian will like that because here he can't perform weddings in BC, but in Brazil, they are not considered weddings by the state, but Freemasons can perform reconfirmation ceremonies, and it's also a reconfirmation of a wedding, and also I will quote, for instance, what is written in a reconfirmation ceremony of the Grand Lodge of Turkey, which is a regular lodge. Grand Lodge of Turkey is regular. It says, quote, among other things, says, the stars and the universe we can or cannot see, with the stars of the universe we can or cannot see, are ruled by an invisible order, which we call the grand architect of the universe. So, an inviolable order, the stars, which you see or cannot see, are ruled by an inviolable order, which you call the grand architect of the universe. Now, this inviolable order, are they the laws of physics? So, because God is not defined, or the grand architect of the universe is not defined, it could be law of physics. And that's, for me, what it is. When I entered Freemasonry, yes, I had my conception of the grand architect was the regular original concept people have of God. That was in 1985. Now we are in 2017, and I think about in 2015 I realized that the grand architect of the universe are the laws of physics. That's for me, and I don't see anything wrong with that. And that's why I'm still an active Freemason. Maybe some people will have different conception of it. Now, I won't talk too much about what humanism is, but you've seen what definition of Freemasonry was. And in all the cases I showed, it didn't seem to contradict humanism. And we know the American Humanist Association says that humanism is progressive. Remember, the same word was used at the Grand Orient of Brazil, that the institution of Freemasonry is a progressive institution. So it's a progressive philosophy of life that, now, for regular Freemasonry, these few words are the ones that would clash with regular Freemasonry. Because humanism says is a progressive philosophy of life without theism and other supernatural beliefs. But if we took that out, and the rest continues, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives, the same thing that we find at some of the other definitions of Freemasonry, official definitions of Freemasonry, to lead the ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the great good of humanity. If we didn't have this without theism and other supernatural beliefs, and had this definition, we could say, well, that's what Freemasonry is. Next. Define humanism from the Humanist UK. Roughly speaking, the word humanist has come to mean someone who trusts the scientific method, makes their ethical decisions based on reason, etc., and believes that now this is the crunch again, the last point, in the absence of an afterlife and any discernible purpose to the universe, human beings can act to give their own lives meaning by seeking happiness in this life and help others to do the same. And the purpose of humanism from our own website was for building a community based on reason, compassion, and hope. So, are Freemasonry and humanism incompatible? There's a site where you can go and ask questions, and Rachel in London asked the following question: is Freemasonry compatible with humanism? Now, Nigel Brown happens to be the Grand Secretary of the United Grand Lodge of England. So, or was when that was published. And he said, the prime qualification for admission to Freemasonry is a belief in a supreme being. Having some form of religious belief is the one thing that all Freemasons have in common, whatever their backgrounds might be. As humanists do not believe in any form of higher power, they cannot fulfill that prime qualification. That is for regular Freemasonry, and that is his opinion, is the view, I guess, not his opinion, because he's speaking as the Grand Secretary of the United Grand Lodge of England, that I think it's still current. Yeah, current. The question was, when was that said, and it's current, it's now. So, according to him then, and according to the United Grand Lodge of England, supposedly, you have to have some form of religious belief. And it's because it's a belief in Supreme Being. However, as I said, the Supreme Being is not defined. So, especially in BC, it's not defined. But, yeah, so you can't, according to him. However, there's the Grand Master of the Grand Orient Lusitano, which is Portuguese Grand Orient. It's irregular. The worshipful brother Fernando Lima, he speaks of a humanistic Freemasonry, of which his obedience, his Grand Lodge, his Grand Orient is part of which is part. It is his obedience is part of this. So for him, Freemasonry is a humanistic. There are different types of Freemasonry, but there is a humanistic Freemasonry. However, now it goes to the however, on the other hand, I read from a statement by Brother Seili Laikits and Worshipful Brother Remzi Samver, who is the Grand Master of the Grand Orient of Turkey, and that happens to be a regular Freemasonry. And that's what it says about the Grand Architect of the Universe. Remember, it's all metaphorical. It's allegorical. It's not to be taken literally when we talk about the Grand Architect of the Universe. What's important is to conceive the Grand Architect of the Universe as a reference point, which enables the working of the system and not to impose it as dogma. With this reference, each Freemason has his own concept of God. As I said, laws of physics, your conscience, what could it be? Which could be God as defined by Christianity, as well as an infinite, absolute, and perfect truth that man sees transcending himself. Therefore, there is not and cannot be a Masonic definition of God. On the contrary, Freemasonry, accepting candidates' belief in a supreme being, teaches them to answer all metaphysical questions with their own conscience. Accordingly, there is no place for dogmas, prejudice, and ready-made formula. Every individual brother faces his own conscience and has to answer his questions by himself, through the help of mind and wisdom, and without using other people's argument. Otherwise, it would be as if Freemasonry was offering a preconceived formula, a dogma, or a doctrine in order to find the truth. That would be contrary to the principles of symbolism, the aim of the initiation, and the very reason as to why Freemasonry exists in the first place. And that's coming from a regular Grand Master of a regular institution, a regular Freemasonry. So there's one part of the coin, and then there's the other part of the coin, both even in the regular Freemasonry. One product of Freemasonry is its philanthropic side, which is also very humanistic. Internationally, for instance, in England, 33 million pounds per year are disbursed towards philanthropic organizations to help Freemasons, but not only them, their families, and the public in general. Also around the world, millions are given to charity, US, Brazil, etc. In Canada, support for learning centers for dyslexic children is one of the philanthropic aims, and even in Vancouver, at the Grand Lodge building on 8th Avenue, which is being moved because they're going to build a new building in the same spot. There is a learning center for dyslexic children. There are also a funding of medical research in universities and hospitals for puzzles of the mind, that they call it, which is issues dealing with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative ailments. And they give, we give, Freemasons give, they give $400,000 annually for that. In BC, $100,000 annually is disbursed for bursary funds for children and relatives and grandchildren of Freemasons to go to school to help with their education. There's also a cancer care project serving 3,000 clients per year. That's when people have to come to Vancouver to go to cancer clinic. They go and pick them up at the airport. They take to the appointments, etc. Money is given for the BC Children's Hospital Foundation, the BC Guide Dog Service, St. Paul's Hospital, $500,000 every year. And local lodges, even local lodges, can have their own little projects. Lynn Valley, for instance, gives donation for a local North Vancouver women's shelters. So, as you see, that's very humanistic. But how did Freemasonry came about? And I mentioned 300 years. They celebrated 300 years of institution. Why 300 years? Because in 1770, June 24th, 1717, the Grand Lodge of England, now United Grand Lodge of England, was organized. What it meant is 3 lodges that already existed in London got together and we are going to create a body to rule Freemasonry and to organize it. And some people say now historical research has been done that it seems to have been later than 1717, but just by a few years, like 1720. But as up to now, they always thought that it was organized in 1717, so 2017 is the anniversary of it, and it was celebrated. And what time, when you think about culture and time at that time, 1700 and 1800, late 1700, 1800, what comes to your mind?
The French Revolution.
Enlightenment. Yes, someone said French Revolution and Enlightenment, the period of Enlightenment. Also, in the 1600s, in England, an institution called the Royal Society came to being. Some of you may have heard of the Royal Society. It still exists today, but Royal Society, all the scientists, the eminent names of philosophers, biologists, scientists of the time belonged to the Royal Society. So, and the founder of the Royal Society is Elias Ashmole. He happened to be a Freemason. And he was initiated in the 1600s, before this body called the United Grand Lodge, or the Grand Lodge of England at the time, was created, because lodges already existed. And therefore, if you make this connection, we can say that the way Freemasonry is organized, the modern Freemasonry from 1717 onwards, is a product of Enlightenment. John Locke wrote a letter concerning toleration. He also was a Mason, but who also was a member of the Royal Society and a Mason, Sir Isaac Newton, and 20 Grand Masters of the Freemasons were members of the Royal Society from 1719 to 1828. In 1723, of the 200 members of the Royal Society, 40 were Masons. In 1725, 47 were Masons. And in 1730, 97 were Masons. So there's a big interconnection between the Enlightenment, those names, and Freemasonry. Moreover, Masonic ritual to this day exhorts its members to study, quote, the 7 liberal arts and sciences, unquote, and, quote, to study the hidden mysteries of nature and sciences, unquote. So, other people were Freemasons, and there are many pictures and paintings of him wearing his Masonic apron. Another person was a Freemason, Peter I. I put him there because it's from my country. He was emperor. And here he is dressed in his emperor clothes and all his Masonic clothing, attire. First emperor of Brazil. Bolivar, El Libertador, also a Freemason. And this is actually his apron. That was his apron of Bolivar, Simón Bolivar. Other people were Freemasons, also names that humanists can empathize with. And Mozart, Voltaire. Let me tell you about Mozart. The Magic Flute is a Masonic opera. And most of the time they don't show the whole Magic Flute, but many years ago they showed the original, like from the time of Mozart. They cut some pieces, they show the whole thing, and it's here in Vancouver at Queen Elizabeth. I went to see it. And any Mason going there would recognize that it is a ritual of Freemasonry that's shown to the public in other ways, but a Mason would know everything that's going on that stage, and and realize that that is a degree. Condorcet, d'Alembert, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Marquis de Lafayette, who helped with the American Revolution. Mark Twain was a Freemason. Atatürk, who created the Turkish and white, Turkey became from, coming from the 7th century to the 20th century because of Atatürk. A country where most people are Muslims, but it's a secular country. Unfortunately, that seems to be changed right now, but Atatürk was a Freemason. Oh, Jess Jackson. So all people involved in human rights and striving for betterment of mankind. Salvador Allende, from Chile, a Freemason. Alexander Fleming, Goethe, the great German poet and playwright. Rudyard Kipling, Lessing, Franz Liszt, Federico Garcia Lorca, Giacomo Puccini, Sibelius from Finland, and John Diefenbaker from Canada. So the list is immense of almost every important luminary through history. Not all, but a great part were Freemasons, and I just chose a few ones. And what do we have in common? Besides the fact that we talked about the philanthropy between, humanism is in favor of the betterment of people and of liberty, fraternity, equality also, and providing help to those that are needed. Another thing that humanism has in common with the Freemasonry is the fact that they have been persecuted and they can be persecuted, and that's because we have the same enemies. I'm putting here up the declaration of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church in Eminentia Postulatus et Specula, a papal bull dated April 28, 1738. It was published by Pope Clement XII. Condemns Freemasonry and excommunicates anyone joining it. And this penalty is still in force today. Now, what happens is any authoritarian regime, the first thing they want to do is to stop Freemasonry. We found that out in Maria Theresa in Austria in 1743, Mussolini's Italy, it happened in Hitler's Germany, in Portugal by Salazar, who was a dictator. Franco's Spain also suffered, the Freemasons suffered. Soviet Union, it's outlawed in mainland China. It's banned in all Arab countries except Lebanon and Morocco. And however, a communist country, because Soviet Union didn't prohibited it, but Cuba, it was never prohibited. So Freemasonry has been able to continue in Cuba uninterrupted. I don't know why. I surmise that probably Castro had some supporters when the revolution occurred in Cuba. I don't know for sure, and I don't know have any historical fact. But I think that's probably the reason, because as you can see, Freemasonry has always been in favor of liberty and on trying to get a more equal and better society. So maybe that's why. And of course, regimes that are autocratic fear Freemasonry, because they have the same beliefs as humanists. Now, I just want to give you an example of a campaign that that Freemasons have had in BC recently. Actually, the month of May was Civility Month. It is to try to inspire civility among people, because as you can see today in government, in many countries, I won't name it, one is specific, there's a lack of civility. So they had an initiative. The Grand Lodge of British Columbia Yukon had an initiative to inspire civility in its people. It talks about civility. It's all about manners, politeness, courtesy, and ethics. Civility in action demonstrates consideration, sensitivity, caring, and kindness in the way we treat each other and our surroundings. Civility code of conduct is based on 3 R's: respect, restraint, and responsibility. What you're suggesting is civility is in its best form and not New World political correctness. We believe it is possible to disagree, but done so in a code of conduct denoted by respectful communications and actions within society. In other words, if one behaves like that, one will behave like a Freemason would, and any decent individual would, right? So, which is something that humanists would subscribe to. Now, to finalize, here are some comparisons between humanism and Freemasonry. So humanism celebrates life, and Freemasonry wants to improve humanity. Humanists are independent thinkers. Well, Freemasonry wants to research for truth, and if you search for truth, you have to think. Humanists want to use reason over faith. Now, in Freemasonry, we have reason, but in parentheses, it's written and faith, because depending on which Freemasonry, regular or irregular, or which even in regular Freemasonry, which interpretation of regular Freemasonry, in all cases, Freemasons want to use reason if they want to attain truth. But in some cases, like the United Lodge of England, they require a faith. Now, humanism wants a well-rounded individual, progressing. In Freemasonry, as I mentioned, even the ritual says you are to give great attention and follow and study the liberal arts and science. Humanism, ethics, is important. The same for Freemasonry. Ethics is important. I think I have another 5 minutes or 4 minutes before I finalize. I passed my book. I hope somebody has it. Yeah. And I was going to pass it around, but it would be too complicated. But I just like to show you, like the universality of Freemasonry. I have different publications here. One is from France. It's called Travaux de la Loge Nationale des Recherches Villa de Honocourt. And that's published by the Grand Loge Nationale Française. This is a regular Grand Lodge in France. And so they put this is one volume. There's several volumes. And it's very thick, has 200 and almost 300 pages, footnotes, quotations, etc. And some of the subjects, just to give you an idea, sacred geometry. They talk about the de-Christianization of the high degrees, because Freemasonry have many degrees. 3 are considered the basic degrees, and that's, everything is contained supposedly in those 3 degrees, but there can be specializations and go up to 33 degrees. And the higher degrees, at the beginning, they have a great Christian connotation in all types of Freemasonry, and then they were de-Christianized in the 19th century. Luminism and so forth, so on, they de-Christianized it. So there's an article about that. There's about an article about Euclid, Vitruvius, an article on the original Hebrew words used in the high degrees. Not in the high degrees, in the 3 first degrees. And also an article on the first chapter on Genesis. That's from France. This is from United Grand Lodge of England. It's called Ars Quatur Coronatum. And this is Latin. but the publication is in English, of course. The French is in French, yeah, and also tons of notes and small print. Masonic History and Historians is one of the articles. The dating of Masonic records. Why was the craft de-Christianized? The United Grand Lodge movement in South Africa, etc. And it's more historical. They tend to be just more historical, not so much esoteric on symbolism and metaphors. And then magazines. Brazilian magazine that's from a Grand Lodge, not the Grand Orient of France, but a Grand Lodge, is also a regular. And Italy, from Grande Oriente d'Italia, Hiram is called, beautiful. And another one, the Hiram was first, and then it was followed by what's called Masonaria Oggi, Masonry Today, is an Italian publication, also very interesting. And this one talks about Declaration on the Principles of Tolerance, Reflections on Tolerance, Kipling and Freemasonry, etc. So you can see by the articles very much what humanists also would pursue. There's so much to say. I didn't want to be gone in all kinds of directions. That's why I created this presentation. And my time is up. I will answer questions if I know how to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helio. Thank you very much.